who is someone that you admire as far as their ability to document history, whether they be a documentarian or something else?
Well, you know, there's any number of great writers, the late Stephen Ambrose, Doris Kearns Goodwin, you know, Tom Brokaw, Evan Thomas, lots of people who are writing really good histories today. You know, and there are lots of really talented filmmakers doing historical film. You know, documentary is a funny word. It's sort of meant to cover a whole bunch of different things. You say feature film, you know, it's fiction. There'll be actors and they'll be reading their scripts and things will be happening. But a documentary could be something like cinema verite with no narration and no music and very little cutting to, you know, stylized stuff like Errol Morris does, The Fog of War, The Thin Blue Line. You've got the propaganda films of Michael Moore. You have Morgan Spurlock sort of advocacy films in the same vein as Michael. You have my stuff. You know, there's such a variety, and what you realize is that you can't say any one is better than the other. You just realize that when you see something that's done well, that it's good, it just is good, you know, and there's, you know, thank God for that variety. We're not in a Soviet system in which there's only one type of documentary to make, and thank God we have all these options. Well, you've walked right into a trap because I, as a historian, or amateur historian is a better word, have to have the passage of time. I want to take something that's at least 20 or 25 or 30 years old. So I'd need to talk to you much later in your life to find out what had really happened back then. I don't think we get the full perspective on it now to understand whether a developing activism, a concern for ecology is genuine or sustaining, or whether it's a kind of frivolous fad that will pass with the first distraction. And that's what we don't know. So this is the great problem of journalism, of course, is that it's attempting to be, as Philip Graham said, the first rough draft of history, trying to report back instantaneously what's going on right now. But everyone knows you never turn in a first draft. You work on it and you massage it and you think about it. You find secondary sources and primary sources that will help you understand it a little bit and see it from different perspectives. And that's what I need. The passage of time permits a kind of perspective that will then be able to make much more comfortable judgments or observations about a particular period. I don't know. I mean, this age group is known for its sometimes insensitivity, its narcissistic self-involvement. And I certainly recall my own period, which was very much that. Um, I think what I've noticed is a trend of a kind of emotional maturity. This might have developed out of the isolation that all of our bombarding media and entertainment forms necessarily put us into, a realization, and perhaps a cynical one, of difficulties in this regard. But I'd rather look at it positively and say that I think we've seen people growing up in a different, more mature way, certainly with regard to relationships and understanding and other important stuff of our lives. I've seen a degree of maturity I certainly didn't experience in my time, nor did I think any of my friends had. We always say that whatever election it is or whatever thing it is, this is the most important stuff. But I do think, and I think everyone would agree, even the old timers who have watched those important transformative moments come and go with a regularity that belies our excitement about right now, that this is a hugely important watershed moment. And while it is not possible to make accurate historical judgments, it is possible as a human being to be caught up with the passions and the enthusiasms and the new ideas that are generated by the collision of ideas that take place in any kind of election cycle. So yeah, I think this is a hugely important moment of watershed stuff about whether America will go forward or backward. And I think that, I hope that, I pray that a majority, however slim it is, want to go forward. And I think even those that are going, who feel the opposite, I think will benefit from the kind of positive change that people, and particularly young people, are feeling we actually have to do to escape the specific gravity of the hole that we've gotten ourselves in, not just out in the world, where our reputation in 8 years has been diminished to one of the worst in our history, not just with our economy, with a laissez-faire attitude that has obtained for the last 30 years, a spirit of deregulation that has permitted the fox to guard the henhouse, and has resulted in the kind of economic hard times that we're going through. But really a kind of spirit of what it is that government can do, that it isn't the enemy. For the first time in history, we have one party that has believed for the last 30 years that it isn't my opinion and my way of running the government is different from yours. It's been arguing that government is in itself intrinsically bad, and that everything that comes from the marketplace is good. Well, we understand what an unfettered marketplace does. The apotheosis of that is slumlords, it's robber barons, it's greedy Wall Street captains of industry, it's people selling tainted milk, not just in China, but it's here. And that there is a role for government to play, and that of course there can be too much government, but it ought to be the opportunity that if we have a kind of energized spirit, we might be able to transform ourselves into the kind of just society, the shining city on the hill that Ronald Reagan talked about. Feels pretty close. You know, it's very interesting that we see this hatred of us around the world. We see our standing as so low, even among our allies, our closest allies. A huge majority of the populations believe that we are the greatest threat to peace in the world, not Al-Qaeda, not Islamic terrorists, not Russia, not China, but the United States. And we sort of think that, how did we get in this hole? 8 years ago, we were beloved around the world. Our economy was strong. How did this happen? And we think it might take that amount of time to change it. It won't. It will change like that. You only had to watch what happened when one of the presidential candidates visited Berlin, and hundreds of thousands of people turned out. They were turning out for what is the operative driving emotion of this, which is hope. The hope that tomorrow will be better than today. And for a long time in the United States, that hasn't been around. And I think that people are beginning to experience that. And if the old tribal ignorances of race and of distrust and of single issue things don't sort of cloud the way, if the better angels of our nature, as Abraham Lincoln liked to talk about it, then I think we have the possibility of sort of really entering a new day, and the change will be instantaneous. Our effectiveness on the world stage will go back to 100%. It's one of the great benefits of change. It's what happens, you fire the coach and all of a sudden the players start hitting again. Let's fire the coach.